Welcome to The Fork in the Road with Perry S. Kaufman, business strategy for founders of private companies. This is the place to evaluate where you are and where you're going on the business lifecycle journey.
Welcome, everybody, to the Fork in the Road podcast. I'm your host, Perry Kaufman, and this is where we get to hear true life stories of visionaries who are on what I call the founder's journey. Today, I'm really excited to hear from Tejas Manohar. He has been a very successful entrepreneur, but he also has a unique background, and kind of a spoiler alert, he does not have, to my knowledge, an MBA from Harvard or Stanford. He's got a great story. So Tejas, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Perry. Super excited to be on this podcast.
Good. Thanks for being here, like I said. And our plan today is kind of to walk through your story from beginning up to current date with your business and your life. And I'm going to start early stage with a softball question for you. Think back when you were 12 or 13 years old, and were you spending more of your free time on learning about programming or about playing table tennis?
When I was 13 years old, I was definitely spending more of my time learning about programming. I've always had a really obsessive personality. So, if you asked me that question when I was 11 years old, it could be a completely different answer. Or 14 years old, it could be a different answer. But it's always a spike and super obsessive about something.
Okay. And my little research had indicated that you had some table tennis background. And I didn't know if that was a big interest or just...
It was a pretty big interest. It's the only sport that I played seriously, like more kind of competitively. But, it wasn't like state ranked or anything like that.
No, it wasn't crazy. I didn't find that you were in the Olympics. So
I wish. I was many levels off from that.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so moving along, still staying in early years, I'm interested in you telling us a little bit about maybe early influencers, and I'll describe that by saying, your parents, I'm sure, were strong influencers, but then extending to whether it be teachers or mentors, whether they were formal or informal, or even maybe a tech icon or two that you felt like you really wanted to study and learn from.
I can give some background on my personal story, if it's okay.
Sure.
I actually grew up I live in San Francisco now, working on my own startup, but I grew up in Tennessee, suburbs of Nashville. And kind of like a small town. Nashville, wasn't as big and popping as it is now when I grew up there.
Mm-hmm.
And so my family actually came from India. I'm kind of the first generation here in the US. They moved here initially as sort of IT contractors, working for government, like 6 state government jobs. And Tennessee is where they got their first full-time position, and we're super excited to really, set the roots in the US there. And they still live there and they love it. And I think my parents were always a huge inspiration to me growing up. They really taught me the value of hard work and that you're in control, which I think is still the biggest life lesson that I really stick to today. Like I really try to believe in all situations that I am personally in control, and that is kind of my responsibility to control my destiny. And I think that's what motivates me as an entrepreneur to work hard, because I feel like I can influence my future by doing that. And so I think my parents had always, whether it was grades or getting better at an instrument, were always like, you're in control. Like, I'm sure there's things like natural talent or whatever, but you're not in control of that. You're in control of hard work, effort, discipline, and in reflecting on how you can get better at something. And so later in life, I've picked up more mentors in industry and stuff like that. But growing up, it's really just my parents.
One of the big things I take away from that, which I didn't know, is they were involved in technology as well. Okay, so they even subliminally were influencing you in that regard. Yeah. So,
but it's interesting. One would think that they would influence me to get into technology. But actually they didn't. They had a little bit more of the than the typical Indian immigrant mindset of like, you should go become like a doctor or an engineer, like electrical engineer or something, or like a lawyer. Technology wasn't the hottest, highest paying industry in the area of technology that they came into, right? They came from India to work for like the Tennessee state government all throughout the time I was in school in Tennessee for multiple decades. Now they've gone to the private sector, but it wasn't like coming from India to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, no.
Where now you're rich and you got a house in Palo Alto and you benefited from the Silicon Valley and the dot-com boom, right? It's still a great career in IT and technology, but never had the prestige that, say, medicine or those industries had. So they actually, encouraged me to look more into those avenues, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. That makes good sense too. Actually, my parents did something similar. Their message was, and again, they weren't overbearingly influential, but they just were influential by role modeling. And they said, it's always good to have a profession so you know that you're an expert in something. So moving along, so it's my understanding that at the age of 16, you landed a job with Segment, and that I'm guessing, but you'll fill in the blanks, I'm guessing that they didn't hire every 16-year-old's resume that was just tossed their way. Tell us about that story.
So the most important thing about getting hired into a real professional job when I was 16, as a software engineer at a Silicon Valley startup here, was making sure they didn't know that I was 16. So
okay.
Zooming back to, I think, 2015, it's about I'm 26 going on at 27 now. This is a little bit over 10 years ago. I had done some internships that, again, just through that idea of agency I mentioned earlier, I just reached out to random companies I saw in Tennessee and were like, could I be a free intern for you all for the summer? I really want to sharpen my coding skills. And I got a paid internship the next summer. And then I really realized I really liked working in a technology company. It's really cool. And I found a way that I could graduate high school early. And the Tennessee school system is not the most difficult versus other school systems in the country. And so I found a way to kind of get the minimum credits and graduate early, but wanted to do a gap year, just something I read about online where a lot of kids maybe who do gap years, I don't know, travel or something. I wanted to
the world, right?
Work at a technology company. And so I had learned through applying for internships before that when I had high school on my resume, that was not leading to a positive success for getting responses from the recruiters. They were looking for college interns. So what I did for when I was getting internships was I just removed my education and just submitted a bunch of internship requests and replaced my education with my projects. And I think, the recruiters probably assumed not that I was in high school, but maybe that I had a bad GPA or didn't go to a top tier school. And so I did the same thing when I was applying for jobs. I just never mentioned that I was currently in school. I had a little bit of a contract job when I was during my time in high school. And so I put that as my most recent experience. And that the second thing I did was, I wanted to make sure that I don't lose on the resume front and that I needed to make sure a lot of people see it. So I would send really personal, handwritten, cold emails to the founders and executives of the companies I wanted to work at with clear reason of why I'm interested in that company. And that's how I landed the job at Segment.
That's great. That's interesting. So I now look, at least on LinkedIn, to understand that you were successful there. You were promoted a time or two. You were probably there for about 3 years. And I have this kind of theory I want to run by you. I feel like I can think about you during that time period at Segment as learning, a massive amount. I mean, you were exposed to new things. You were probably assigned to new projects. You were just like a sponge soaking up so much information. And my theory is, in the back of your mind, your wheels were turning, thinking about, I wonder if this could work or that would be better or could be improved this way. And so your brain was kind of working in parallel. I don't know if that's true, but that's my theory. What do you think?
It definitely was. Part of the reason I was so interested in moving to San Francisco and Silicon Valley is because from working at some technology companies and from just, you asked the role model question earlier, from watching TV and seeing tech entrepreneurs. I never knew them. I still don't know them, but like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and stuff like that. I was like, I want to get to Silicon Valley and I want to be in technology and I want to start a company. I think that's really cool to build something from scratch. Now, I didn't think it was a B2B company. I thought I'd build something more consumer, that everyone's using. Back then, I didn't know about this B2B concept, which we can talk about later. But I wanted to be in the center of that. And so when I came to SF, exactly, I wanted to be a sponge while I was working at Segment. I was thinking in the back of my head, what's the company I can create after this? And it was a dream of mine that I wanted to realize as soon as possible.
If I didn't mention it, that was part of my note taking, was that you were learning and dreaming simultaneously. Yeah, that's great. So now I want to kind of transition and get your insights. At some point, it's my belief and understanding that you were in a room with two folks that became your co-founders, and you guys were talking. You were probably sharing, again, your dreams or aspirations or visions, or you were talking about, I wasn't sure if the entrepreneurism DNA was natural and built in, or your technology just led you to that. But can you tell us a little bit about the conversations that you were having amongst the three of you early on?
For sure. A lot of people say, oh, it's not right to just try to be an entrepreneur because you want to be an entrepreneur, or try to build a company because you want to build a company. You should be following your mission when building a company, and you should have an idea. You should all be rooted in an idea that you deeply personally care about. I actually think that's just completely wrong. Like, I think, yes, that's one way to build a business. If you deeply care about this idea from the get-go and you can't get an idea out of your head, absolutely go pursue it. A second way is that you want to build a business and you're deeply interested in the idea of entrepreneurship and building a business. And I would say when it comes to Kashish, Josh, and I, we're deeply obsessed about the problem we're working on with regards to transforming marketing with AI. But we were actually brought together because we all really wanted to start a business. And we thought that sounded really exciting, being able to work on all aspects of business and create something big from nothing. And so that was the thing that actually motivated us, and is my like slightly contrarian take on, something I hear, like, shouldn't just start a startup for the sake of it. It's like, well, why not? If you're interested in a startup, like, go do it. And so what brought us together was that interest in building together, creating something that had a lot of impact in the world and on our customers, and building a big business from scratch was something that was super interesting to us. And I think we can talk about this if you're interested too, but like the initial idea was completely different from what HighTouch is today. We were working on a travel company initially, so completely different. And I think that shows our passion for just creating a business, and that we were willing to iterate and change direction as much as we needed to get to something that was a working business.
That's very interesting point. And I'm glad you identified the fact that the driver wasn't some solution you were dreaming about. It was, in fact, the entrepreneurial path to create something. And all three of you had that mindset rather than some technological breakthrough or something like that. Is that right? We
did. Don't get me wrong. I think our technological breakthroughs came as we were working on the business.
Oh, I understand.
But the thing that drove us to come together was that we wanted to create a business, and we really liked working with each other and being with each other.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. How long was it from the time you kind of started sitting in the room together to the day you actually decided to launch an organization or establish yourself? And or did you leave Segment immediately, or how did that work?
So I'll tell you the story. So there's three founders of HighTouch: Kashish, Josh, and myself. We're all still happily working together today. Wouldn't build a business with anyone else. We've been working together for 6+ years now. Josh and I initially met as coworkers at Segment. So Josh was actually another engineer at Segment. I was in the interview process for him. We always joke with him that, he actually didn't pass my interview at Segment, but I'm glad we made an exception because, it changed the course of my life working with him. Kashish was Josh's roommate. So they were friends kind of outside of work. Maybe their desire to build a business and entrepreneurship somehow created common interests and made them friends. I'm not sure, but they were friends outside of work. Josh and I really enjoyed working together. We actually became personal friends through working together. Josh and Kashish lived in this big hacker house in San Francisco. And none of us live there anymore. We're in a different kind of stage of life right now, but it was a great time. And I actually moved in. So I became friends with Josh. I moved into this hacker house. There's a lot of people starting businesses in this house too, actually, which is super cool. By living together, we spent a lot of time outside work together, all three of us. And Kashish at the time, there was a little bit of fork in the road here, actually, right? Kashish at the time was working on his own startup. He had graduated from Penn and come to San Francisco. He wanted to build a company. He actually told this job he had lined up that he was only going to start a year later because he wanted to spend a year trying to build a company in San Francisco. And so he was working on a travel business. Think of it as like ChatGPT for business travel, using AI to kind of revolutionize how you interact with these business travel agencies like Ralston, Wagonlit, and stuff like that. Josh and I were working at Segment. And then Josh got really passionate about this idea of basically building a new way to deploy software to IoT devices, like a fridge, deploy software to a fridge, or now a physical, humanoid robot or a manufacturing system, et cetera. You're probably already realizing neither of those ideas have nothing to do with marketing. So we made some other forks in the road after. And it was interesting. We're all friends, and Josh and Kashish were both trying to convince me to join their company as co-founders. Different companies, different companies at the time. And I was very conflicted, which one should I join? I like both of these guys so much. And I ended up working with Kashish. And so we worked on this travel business for about a year, and then COVID hit. And COVID totally killed our business overnight, right? We had raised venture funding. We were getting more customers every month. I wouldn't say that the business was rock solid. It had a lot of flaws. It's a low margin industry. It's a very hard industry. And I'm very glad we're not in the travel industry. But literally one day, the graphs were going up. And then, March 3rd or something like that, US quarantines announced, everything zeroed. All we had was support. And that's what you're trying to reduce as a travel business. Support is your cost. You're trying to reduce that. Now we had no revenue and all support. It was horrible. We had to shut down the business gracefully, but we had to shut it down because it's all cost, no revenue. At the same time, Josh was getting a little tired of working alone on his startup and also sort of changing his idea around and looking for new ideas and different directions for the business. But we're all living together in this big hacker house during COVID. And so we just thought it makes sense to all work together. So it's kind of funny how the fork in the road, I had to choose between the two of them. Who am I going to work with? And it ended up being no choice at all.
That's great. That's great. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, I want to take a shot at describing what HighTouch does. Okay. And then you're going to clean it up or tell me I was totally wrong, and then explain it if you don't mind. And then we'll continue the conversation. My belief from my limited research is that, quite a number of years ago, organizations learned that there was a bunch of information that need to be centralized so that different aspects of the business could tap into it and get the information they needed to execute in their own way. That was the data warehouse. HighTouch, what I think I understand, is that kind of reverse that, such that all that data in the warehouse is automatically pushed out to various areas within the organization. And I'm going to use an example to explain the power of it, because I think it's very cool if I got it right. The data warehouse has a lot of information about customers and customer activity and even prospects or companies to become customers. And as that all gets pushed out, let's say into the sales department, into a tool like Salesforce, then that allows the following: the salesperson to wake up log on to their screen. And in the old world, they would pull a dashboard or some type of report out of Salesforce and try to figure out what their priorities of the day were. Conversely, I think I understand that HighTouch via AI, that salesperson gets up in the morning, logs on, and there's a message that says, XYZ company has not yet purchased our upgraded version of this tool. Contact them immediately. Is that close?
That is pretty good. So you did some good resear's.
Just give me at least a B. That's all I asked for.
That's a A-, I would say. So okay. No, it was really quite good. You're exactly right. The core thesis was that businesses are centralizing all of this data in the data warehouse. That was initially fueled by a demand to do analytics. So that business analysts can build reports like, here's our sales for the week, here's our sales for the month, here's what our website traffic looks like. But then the problem with reports is, people only look at them so much, right? I might take a screenshot of the report, put in my board deck, put in my monthly metric recaps. But how often am I actually using the report and these data analytics tools to drive what we're actually doing as a business? Not that often. But how often should I be using it? A lot. And so that's the problem HighTouch solves. We're all about activating data. So data activation, not data analytics. And so we sit on top of that data warehouse and we say that's the most valuable set of data in the business. And then we're the central nervous system that brings it to all the departments. So you're right. Salespeople can get automatically notified by an AI system on top of that data saying, hey, you need to go talk to this customer right now. The data says so. Instead of just guessing who from their list of 20 to reach out to.
I'm a business guy. I'm not a technologist.
Yeah.
Recognize value in the business context. When I understand what technology is doing, everybody's been talking about how do you make AI drive productivity? That's the example of it, I think. So,
exactly. And then marketing is the big use case that we are super focused on. And actually, we think that data and AI is going to completely transform the marketing departments at large consumer companies. So we started the company by serving all of these use cases around the business. We still do that through a horizontal platform, whether it's service, sales, marketing, product experiences. But then marketing is one that we're going super deep on. We believe that, in the future, every interaction, like every push notification, every SMS, every email, every screen of an app you open up, every ad you see from a large B2C company is going to be completely driven by data and AI. Right? You can see this with the apps like DoorDash or Spotify or Uber that have these like super tailored personal experiences in their application, and they also really get you hooked as well. That is driven by.
I heard something about that. Go ahead.
By very large, data and AI teams at those companies, and we're bringing those capabilities to every single business around the world. And so that's the area that we're super, super, super focused on. Okay.
All right. So let's take that. And, I'm looking at your story through the lens of what I call the predictable stages of the business life cycle. And we're still in stage one, and stage one is all about survival. You want to survive. Okay. So when the three of you came together, then the next thing was you had to develop a product or an offer. Tell me just approximately, what was the timeline from, all right, we've launched this initiative and, did it take a month, a year, a decade? No, I understand. But how long would you say?
So since the time I started working with Kashish on the travel business to getting our first customer for HighTouch, about a year and a half. 1 year spent on the travel business, 6 months spent resetting the business and finding HighTouch.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to focus in on that as the history of HighTouch. So you're telling me that you had this idea that was going to leverage AI and push out the information and have the capabilities to recognize how to send messages that were effective. Okay. And you developed that in 6 months, right?
That's right.
Okay. And did you get venture funding for this as well?
Yeah, so we actually raised our venture funding at the beginning of the company as a travel business. And, still our corporation today is that same corporation. And so the initial funding got us through to HighTouch as well. And I think our investors are very happy that we pivoted.
I'm sure. But let me get this straight for the people listening. Okay. So you had a thesis you went to, and you made a deal to get venture funding to pursue this travel concept, and that died, so to speak. And you pivoted to what HighTouch is today that we just talked about. And I presume you had to have conversations with your venture partners to say, hey, we believe this is our next path. And they said, go for it, right?
100%. Yeah. Okay. Most of them assumed, the money was going in the trash can, right?
I know. Yeah. Well, it definitely was.
Yeah, and it was. And so they were, but then I would say the thing that really made them interested was just, Kashish and I, not to be like, it's not to have high self-esteem, but I think travel was already like an uninvestable industry in a lot of ways to these investors.
Oh, yeah, of course. So, during COVID. Yeah.
Even pre-COVID, it's a very hard industry to build a technology business in. Venture capital doesn't like it that much. People think the margins are super low. All of those things are true. The people who, we were really stressed about those conversations with the investors saying, hey, we're going to do a good business.
I'm certain of that. Yeah.
But it turned out they were all really supportive.
Okay, great. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to wrap up this stage one because you've survived. So that was great. And I want to pivot to stage two, which I'm going to refer to as really proving you had something of value, a business proposition. And if you can tell me at some point you got this development, this product ready to go to market. Tell us about the first few, opportunities you got in front of and you pitched what you had to offer. And if it was super smooth, bumpy, what kind of feedback did you get?
Our first 3 customers at HighTouch, we got them in completely different ways, and they were in completely different industries. And that's actually what ended up giving us conviction in the business. We're like, if 3 companies all around the world, different industries, want the software to do the same thing, probably a big market. Either it was really random or it's a big market, one or the other.
Yeah, that's right.
So exactly what you mentioned, right? You have this idea as an entrepreneur, you built an initial solution, but then you got to find the customers ultimately. And I always just think back to the big thing I mentioned at the beginning, agency, right? You're in control as an entrepreneur. You just got to go try a bunch of stuff. And so I asked everyone I knew for introductions to customers. LinkedIn made that easier to kind of find people I knew, but didn't even talk to recently. And so asked coworkers, mutual connections. I asked everyone I knew if I could get an introduction to someone they knew that could be an interesting customer for us. Second, I found these online communities on Slack or different online forums that were for digital marketing or revenue operations. So teams that manage that thing, like which leads should I prioritize as a company, or data engineering. And I searched those communities for, is anyone talking about the problem that HighTouch solves? Tried a lot of keywords and even posted in some of them. And then I tried some different angles. Like we launched our product online, we posted on Twitter and LinkedIn, but I had interned at HubSpot many years before, and our software also complemented HubSpot. So if you think about a company runs their sales and marketing outside of a solution like HubSpot or Salesforce, HighTouch can become the brain that sends signals to HubSpot and Salesforce of, you should really email this customer about this product we have on our books, etc. And so I just put myself out there. I was like, I did there was one lunch and learn when I was an intern at HubSpot where the founder was there, Dharmesh, and he talked about his founding journey. And so I decided to email him as well. I put a blog post online about how HighTouch helps HubSpot, and emailed him and was like, can you help share this on social media? And I made the blog post about a new feature HubSpot has released that month, and how HighTouch can help that feature. So it's relevant to what he was posting about. And he actually posted it. I didn't expect him to even respond, but he posted it. And so we got our first 3 customers through those 3 methods. One was from an online community. One was from an introduction by a former coworker of mine at Segment. And then one was from when the HubSpot founder shared our blog post online. A HubSpot sales rep in Europe saw the post and said, hey, this could really help my customer that I'm talking to. And
Oh my
that
God.
person referred us to a customer in
Yes.
like Norway. And a newspaper in Norway became one of our first 3 customers. So it was very random, but we just tried everything. I mean, really, it just came down to that.
All right. So now, okay, we're in my, what I call stage 2, okay, and proving the business model, which is all about market acceptance and ability to execute. So now you were getting some market acceptance. And the question is, what was going on in the background to be sure that you had customer support and that things were going well for these initial customers? Because as you know, had they not, you'd be in a bit different position today.
100%. My learning as an entrepreneur is that the initial few customers that use any new product you build are initially some of the unhappiest customers you ever work with, but then they become the happiest customers. So it's
as long as you can support them and
exactly,
get them there.
It's exactly right. They're initially the most unhappy customers. I've never seen customers as unhappy as when our initial customers tried our product, but then they're unsatisfied, I'll say.
Right.
But then they become the happiest customers. I'll unravel that a bit because we've launched 3 kind of major products here through our history of HighTouch, each of which has tens of millions of revenue now, and I've seen this pattern every single time. And so first they're a little unsatisfied because they have this huge problem and they try your product and it hasn't been tried by other customers yet. So it doesn't work perfectly, right? So I'm not gonna say they're unhappy. They're excited to be working with you.
They're actually part of your incubation process, really.
Exactly. You got to learn from the customer. And so they're a little bit like, hey, this company's a little all over the place. And then they become the happiest because you end up building a lot of features just for them. And they actually inspire making what's the best product at the end of the day. And so how we approached this initially was really just first principled. We weren't like, hey, we have customers, now we need to go build a support team, marketing team, implementation team, et cetera. We were like, we're going to do every task required to make these customers successful ourselves.
Right.
Between the 3 of us. Just divvy them up. I initially did more of the product and sales in the beginning of the business. Kashish did the marketing, which was super important in the beginning of the business. And then Josh did our engineering and actually coding the actual product. And we would all alternate a little bit too. When it becomes a little bit too much work for one of us, we start hiring people. And so it's just that over and over and over and over again.
Great. So you transitioned and there's tension when you're in that initial growth phase between continuing to grow and support and make sure that you're going to be successful and profitability. So just because you get revenue, you obviously don't immediately become profitable, but especially when you have to grow and begin to add people.
100%.
So now I'm going to move us into stage 3, which is the real growth stage, which leads to what I refer to as the true scaling phase. And as you get there, was there a moment when you feel like you were so happy, but all of a sudden you were kind of on a rocket that was almost out of control?
Yeah, there were 2 moments for us where we were like, there's really something here and we need to be in the growth mindset. The first moment was when we hit, again, somewhere between 3 and 5 customers that all were very different, but wanted the same product. That was the first inkling of there's really something here. It's probably a big market. The second inkling, honestly, I kind of felt it after this first situation, but my co-founders really believed in it equally after the second situation, which was we had launched an online version of the product. You could just sign up online and try it out, self-service. Didn't have to talk to a salesperson. And there was a week where 5-day business week, let's say, every single day that week, a new customer had signed up online, set it up themselves, and became a happy customer, let's call it, all by themselves. Okay. And then my co-founders were like, it doesn't feel like we're pushing the product. It feels like the market's pulling the product out of us, and we've just got to get it in front of enough people. And so at that point, we were like, let's slam the fuel on the scaling and growth phase. And it's not really one phase. There's multiple phases of this, right? So initially it's like, we've got to figure out the tactics to scale. I think, we can talk about this after, but now the phase the business is at with 350 people in very built out departments for sales and marketing, et cetera.
Yeah.
Tactics searching is one part of it. It's always there as the founder, but a lot of it's actually finding the people and organizing the company in a way that unlocks scale. But in the beginning, we've got to figure out those first couple tactics to scale. We went fully into a marketing mindset, and we took some of the initial ways we found customers and we were like, how do we do more of that? So we found that engaging these communities of data engineers and marketing professionals online, posting educational content to them, responding and helping them out on things they're posting in these communities was a good way to find customers. And so we were doing it ourselves initially, and we were like, let's go hire someone who can do this for us. We actually hired someone who was basically the persona that we were selling into to work at our company and go help out these customers in various communities. So that was one of the initial go-to-market motions that was a part of scaling. Another one was content. So, pre-ChatGPT, like SEO was, we talked to one of our investors and advisors in the business. He had built a business himself before and was like, told us we got a lot of traffic through search engine optimization. Having a lot of articles that digital marketers and data professionals would be Googling for that could help their day-to-day. And then you show up there, you start to build awareness with those populations that are in your ideal customer profile. And then they find out about your tool through that content. And so he told us, like, this is a long game, but it's tried and true method. You just got to invest in it. And so we hired a content person to help with that. Pre-AI, right? So who couldn't, you need to write the best content. You need to know the SEO craft, those two things. And so we found someone in one of the communities actually who was really good at writing content. We're like, hey, you should join. The other method we use tried and true in B2B software is just sales, right? Yeah. And so we were doing some ourselves, like, spending a couple hours a day emailing various prospective customers, but we needed to scale that out, and we needed to try things like cold calling and things that were more time intensive, right? And so we hired our first sales reps for the organization as well. That
sounds great, and kind of led you into that true scaling phase. As you built out, continued to grow at a rapid pace, and you were adding people to your team, did you feel like your leadership skills tweaked a bit, or had to change some, or narrative of communicating the vision and all that? I guess it obviously became different than the three of you sitting in a room and reading each other's minds. You knew it, everybody was thinking, but you had to kind of mold everybody's view of what the future looked like and your mission, right? Yeah. I think the two biggest things that were a learning curve for me as an entrepreneur, were very important. I recognize we're very important. It's something I'm still getting better and better and better at, and it's different as the company scales, are one, communicating the priority to the business in a way that everyone gets it. A lot of people talk about vision. In my opinion, vision is just a part of that, right? It's like, what are we striving towards the business? Where do we want to be in a year from now? Kind of forget 3 years, 10 years in some ways. Like, where do we want to be in a year from now? And what do I think is the best way to get us there? What are the things we need to prioritize to get us there? And then the second thing I would say is, you got to be rowing in the same direction. So that's the vision and the communication thing. But then the second thing is you got to be executing really well, right? Like you need maniacal execution. As an entrepreneur, you need to go from doing that yourself. Like, usually entrepreneurs are pretty good at doing a variety of different tasks themselves and can execute really well, but then to doing it through people. And the second biggest thing I'd say is this idea of being like confrontational, of like, hey, like, this is actually not good. Like, what you're doing is not correct. Like, here's a different way to do it. Or, it's not good enough. Like, maybe it's good, they're trying really hard, but it's not good enough. And here's why.
And initially, you know, are people without a lot of experience in management, unless you're just born to do this stuff, right? Like you tend to like do the work for the person you hired or help them out a little bit too much, but don't really set clear expectations on what good enough is and aren't always comfortable being super direct. And so that's the other thing that that I had to kind of like grow and adapt in myself as an entrepreneur.
No question. I'm sure of that. And always holding people accountable to the right standards like you're describing of what your expectations are. Good. Let's talk quickly about, you must have had some venture funding that allowed you to get to that stage, but there came a time where you needed to consider raising capital again to truly support that scaling phase. Coming to that point, like, what was the signal?
You're exactly right. When you're trying to grow the business very fast, you tend to not want to optimize every bit of like the margin story, for example, on your product. And then you also want a lot of capital to be able to invest upfront into things like sales and marketing. That was exactly the same story here at HighTouch. We've raised, you know, over 200 million of capital at this point, and we've raised that through, let's call it like 4 or 5 tranches over the last 6 years. You know, we got lucky the first couple of times where actually we had a lot of interest from investors. Like, I think we didn't have to go out and like say, does anyone, you know, want to invest in this company? We're raising money. But actually, we did a lot of marketing for the company, and that also ended up catching the eyes of investors that would come to us. But the biggest thing investors wanted to understand is the vision for the business.
Yeah.
And where does it go from here? And, you know, our biggest lesson on that as entrepreneurs is that the messaging for investors is very different than the messaging for customers.
Yes.
And so, what you say to customers may be great and completely working. You may need to have a completely different talk track for investors, because they're thinking about the fundamentals of the business, pattern matching it to other businesses that have succeeded and failed, the future value of the business, whereas customers are just thinking of whether this product can solve our problem today.
Right.
And so, you know, something that was a bit of a learning for me is like, I've always been super obsessed with the customer. I think that's like a part of every entrepreneur's obsession when they're building the business. But then when it comes to investors, like, you have to just think of things from a different lens and iterate on the pitch the same way you iterate on your pitch with customers. It was like, hey, what didn't work in that meeting? What do they need to hear instead? And just be super reflective and fast iteration there.
That is great. Well, a couple of things before we wrap up. First of all, I want to congratulate you on huge success. And one of the things I'm most impressed about, Tejas, is that I'm sure you had a lot of technological knowledge and you learned so much and so fast. But your business acumen, I think, has grown, I'm sure, along the way. And I would say, I'm guessing you were a quick study on adapting and learning, you know, because you had to. But that's an important thing. So you should deserve recognition for that as well, along with your recognition about tweaking and understanding from a leadership standpoint some of the changes that you had to consider. I'm going to ask you a last question. It's not the one I mentioned to you earlier, so it's next to the last question. Where do you think your future lies in the context of building HighTouch to whatever your vision for HighTouch is, and or having a totally different idea pop in your mind that one day you might want to start over again and pursue?
So I think something I've always been fascinated by is companies that aren't just a single product, but really build like, I don't know, for lack of a better word, more of an empire over time, right? Like look at Meta, right? Initially just Facebook. Initially, Facebook was a lot smaller of a concept than what it is today. It was for college students. Now it's changed the whole world. Now they have messages, WhatsApp, Instagram, and so on and so forth. Same with a company like Salesforce or Microsoft or Apple. And so our goal has always been to create one of those companies, like really a generational business that has a lot of facets to it. It's very multifaceted. It has a lot of businesses inside of it that could be independent companies. And that's something that kind of like Kashish and I aligned on at the beginning of the business. Hopefully we don't have to create another company, and could just keep working on this company for longer and longer, but make new companies within it and have that innovation mindset within HighTouch.
That's great. That's a perfect answer. I can relate to it. And you gave great examples of companies that have been able to do that over the years. Okay. So we're going to wrap up with dial back. If a young entrepreneur came to you and said, I want to start a business, you have 2 or 3, key things you would share with them or suggest to them?
So one is definitely that concept of agency that I mentioned at the beginning. You just have to believe that you can figure out any task that comes your way, whether it's how to build your product, if it's, technically complicated, how to find customers. You just have to believe there's a way, and then just keep trying things until you get there, right? You have to be persistent about it. Sometimes you can't directly, agency can come up in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes it's not like, oh, I need more customers for my business, so I'm just going to have agency and keep trying the one idea I have. If that's not working, then you have to have the agency to go find someone online who can give you more ideas, right?
Right.
And he's built a business before, and reach out to them in a way that's compelling and get their advice on the topic. And so you just have to have this mindset of I can figure it out and just go do it. Second, I would say is resourcefulness.
Mm-hmm.
Cold emails and just reaching out to people on LinkedIn have had a huge impact on our business. We found some of our biggest customers that way. We found mentors for the business that have, changed the trajectory of our business that way. Like sometimes I think, how do I know this person? And then I'm like, oh, I actually just reached out to them 5 years ago, or someone else I reached out to referred me to them. And so I think just being really resourceful is super, super important for an entrepreneur. It is critical. And then lastly, I would say is curiosity, which is the best ideas often come from the places that you don't expect them to. And so you just want to be super curious and be a learning sponge. And your business may look totally different than where you started.
That's great. Would you say that your description of being resourceful is aligned with or close to resilience? Or do you see those different? That's one of the things I always talk to founders about. You're going to get knocked down or at least crippled somewhere in this process. So you have to your point, maybe that's more the agency point that you said that you can do this and you get up and pivot or go a different direction as needed.
Yeah. I see it as more of the agency point, as you mentioned. Just, if thing 1 doesn't work, go figure out idea number 2. You're in control. Just keep trying stuff. Resilience is super, super, super critical. I see resourcefulness as more, I read this one article of someone who started a company in our space. Let me just go email them and try to learn more from that person. Or that person mentioned XYZ. Let me go ask them if they can connect me to another person. Like just finding ways to find answers is what I think about there.
Perfect. Sounds great. Well, Tejas, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I wish you all the luck in the world continuing. And tell everybody how they can follow you, reach out to you, or learn more about you.
For sure. So you can find HighTouch at hightouch.com. So just like a high touch customer service, right? Basically. Myself on pretty much every major platform, LinkedIn and Twitter. My username is just my name. So that's Tejas Manohar, but it's probably easier to just search HighTouch founder.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks again for all your insights and congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Perry.
This has been The Fork in the Road with Perry S. Kaufman. If you're a founder and this episode helped you think differently about where you are and where you're going, please visit perryskaufman.com.